The ocean whispered softly under the silver glow of the moon. Waves rolled onto the shore, pulling back with a rhythm that felt like a heartbeat. The air smelled of salt, freedom, and something unspoken. It was a night that seemed to promise secrets, the kind of night when the world itself leaned in close to listen. On the quiet stretch of sand, far from the noise of the town, she walked barefoot. Her toes sank into the cool grains as the sea breeze brushed against her skin, teasing strands of her hair into wild shapes. She wasn't looking for company. She had come to the beach simply to feel alive, to let the worries of her week be carried away with the tide. But then she noticed him. He was sitting near a weathered piece of driftwood, a small fire glowing beside him. The flames painted his face in warm shades, shadows shifting across his features. He looked up, meeting her eyes across the space between them. For a moment, neither moved. The only sound was the rush of the sea and the crackle of fire. Something unspoken passed between them. Not words, not even gestures, just the strange electricity that happens when two strangers recognize something in each other. "Evening," he said at last, his voice low, carrying easily over the wind. She hesitated. Then, almost against her own plan, she stepped closer. "Evening," she replied, her voice soft but steady. He gestured toward the fire. "Care to sit? The night feels colder than it should." She glanced at the flames, then back at him. Common sense told her to keep walking, to enjoy the beach alone. But there was something about the way he spoke, something unthreatening yet magnetic. Against her own careful nature, she found herself lowering down onto the sand, the warmth of the fire licking at her skin. They sat in silence for a while, just listening. The waves. The crackle of burning wood. The distant call of seabirds who hadn't yet given up on the night. It was peaceful but charged, as though the world was holding its breath. "What brings you out here?" he finally asked. She shrugged lightly, hugging her knees. "Needed some air. Needed the sea." "And you?" He poked at the fire with a stick, watching sparks scatter upward like stars. "The same. I like the quiet. At night, the ocean feels honest. No pretending." She looked at him carefully then. The firelight revealed strength in his shoulders, but also something gentler in his eyes. He wasn't just another wanderer on the sand. There was depth there, and she found herself wanting to know more. As the minutes slipped by, they spoke in fragments. She learned he was traveling, just passing through the town. He learned she lived nearby, escaping to the beach whenever she could. The more they spoke, the less the night felt ordinary. At one point, the wind grew stronger, tugging at her thin shawl. He noticed instantly and offered his jacket. She resisted at first, then gave in, slipping it around her shoulders. It was warm, carrying the faint scent of him, something fresh, something grounding. The gesture was simple, but it stirred something inside her. "Better?" he asked. She nodded, her lips curving into a small smile. "Much." The firelight reflected in his eyes as he studied her. There was no rush in his gaze, no push, only a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken. She felt suddenly aware of the closeness, the intimacy of two strangers sharing a fire on an empty beach. The moon climbed higher, painting the waves in silver. Their conversation slowed, replaced by long silences that weren't uncomfortable. She realized she wasn't thinking about tomorrow, or yesterday, or anything beyond this moment. Just the sound of the ocean, the glow of fire, and the presence of him beside her. When she finally rose to leave, he stood too. "Will you be back tomorrow?" he asked, his tone calm but carrying hope. She hesitated, her hand brushing a lock of hair from her face. "Maybe," she said, though her heart already knew the answer. As she walked away, the fire at her back, she felt the night clinging to her skin. Something had begun. She didn't know what it was, but the ocean seemed to whisper that it was only the first step. And tomorrow night, the beach would wait for them both. The next evening, she told herself she wouldn't go. She had things to do, tasks left unfinished, and excuses that sounded reasonable enough. But as the sun slipped below the horizon and the first stars appeared, her thoughts drifted back to the fire on the sand, to the man with steady eyes and a voice that carried calm like the tide. Almost without realizing, she found herself walking again along the shoreline. The breeze was warmer this time, carrying the faint smell of salt and driftwood. The ocean shimmered under the rising moon, and there, just as she secretly hoped, was the firelight in the distance. He was there. Waiting. When he saw her approach, a slow smile curved his lips. He didn't say anything at first, just tossed another piece of wood onto the fire, letting the sparks swirl into the dark. She stopped a few feet away, her heart strangely unsteady. "I thought you might not come," he said finally, his tone light but carrying something deeper. "I wasn't planning to," she admitted, brushing her hair back as the wind teased it forward. "But I'm here." He patted the sand beside him. "Then I'm glad." This time she sat down without hesitation, slipping into the jacket he offered before she even asked. The fabric was still warm from him, and she pulled it close. The waves crashed softly behind them, the fire painting the night in gold and shadow. They spoke again, but the words came slower, deeper. Not small talk now. She told him about her favorite books, the ones she carried to the beach in daylight. He told her about the places he had traveled, distant cities that felt like dreams. Their voices wove together with the sound of the sea until the night itself seemed to lean closer to listen. At one point, he reached out to hand her a smooth stone he had found near the water. Their fingers brushed just a fleeting touch, but enough to send a spark rushing up her arm. She glanced at him quickly, and found his gaze waiting, steady, unhurried. The silence that followed was charged. The kind of silence where everything unspoken seemed louder than words. "You have a way of listening," she said softly, trying to steady her breath. He tilted his head. "And you have a way of making silence feel alive." She laughed gently, though her chest felt tight. The fire's warmth, the salt wind, the steady rhythm of the waves, it all wrapped around her until she wasn't sure where the night ended and she began. As the hours slipped by, the tide crept closer, foam hissing just a few feet from their fire. The air grew cooler, but she barely noticed. They were leaning closer now, their shoulders brushing, their voices dropping lower. The world beyond the beach seemed far away. Here, there was only this moment, the two of them, and the unspoken pull between. When she shivered, whether from the chill or from something inside, he noticed. Without a word, he shifted, wrapping the jacket tighter around her shoulders. His hand lingered for a second longer than it needed to, his fingers grazing her arm. Her breath caught. Their eyes met again, the firelight flickering in both. She thought he might lean closer, that the space between them would finally vanish. For a heartbeat, she wanted it. But then the sound of a crashing wave broke the spell, and she looked away, her cheeks warm. He didn't push. He only smiled faintly, his gaze returning to the sea. That patience, that quiet steadiness, somehow made the moment even more intoxicating. When the night grew late, she finally rose, brushing sand from her legs. "I should go," she said, though her heart ached at the thought. He stood too, his height casting a long shadow in the firelight. "Will you come back?" She hesitated, her lips curving into a smile she couldn't quite hide. "You'll just have to find out." Her footsteps left faint prints in the sand as she walked away, but her pulse was still racing. The beach behind her seemed alive with memory, the warmth of his hand, the brush of fingers, the unspoken promise in his gaze. That night, lying awake in her bed, she closed her eyes and heard again the sound of the waves, the crackle of fire, and his voice in the dark. And she knew tomorrow, she would return. She told herself she would wait until later the next day, that she wouldn't go rushing back to the beach like someone chasing a dream. But when the sun began to dip into the horizon, painting the sky with shades of gold and crimson, her resolve crumbled. The ocean called her, and so did he. Her steps carried her swiftly along the sand, her heart beating a rhythm that matched the waves. When she saw the faint glow ahead, her chest tightened with something she dared not name. The fire was already burning, and he was there, leaning back against the driftwood as if he had been waiting for her all along. "You came," he said, his tone calm but threaded with warmth. She smiled, breathless. "I couldn't stay away." This time, there was no hesitation between them. She sat down close enough that their shoulders brushed. The firelight wrapped them in a cocoon of warmth, and the ocean spread out endlessly beyond, silver under the rising moon. They spoke little at first, as if both knew words would only steal from the silence that pulsed between them. Instead, they listened, the crackle of the fire, the song of the sea, and the quiet thrum of their own breathing. It was he who reached out first. His hand brushed hers in the sand, deliberate this time. Their fingers lingered, testing, before finally weaving together. She felt the roughness of his skin against hers, strong yet gentle. That simple touch sent a shiver racing through her. "You feel cold," he murmured. She shook her head. "Not cold. Just aware." He smiled at that, and the firelight caught in his eyes. There was patience in him, yes, but also hunger, something held back with effort. She felt it, and it mirrored the rush inside her own chest. Time stretched thin. The night pressed closer, the sound of the waves a constant heartbeat. When she turned her face toward him, their eyes locked. Slowly, carefully, he leaned closer. Her breath faltered. The first kiss was soft, tentative, as though testing whether the moment was real. His lips brushed hers with gentleness, lingering just long enough to spark fire in her veins. She drew in a sharp breath, and then she leaned in again, no hesitation this time. The second kiss was deeper. Warmer. His hand rose to cradle her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin as their lips moved in sync, as though they had always known each other. The taste of salt and smoke clung between them, and the world beyond the beach vanished. When they finally pulled apart, her heart was racing, her face flushed. She laughed softly, unable to stop the smile spreading across her lips. "That wasn't planned," she whispered. He tilted his head, his smile slow and steady. "Some things shouldn't be." She leaned against him then, resting her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her, strong and sure, pulling her closer. Together they watched the tide creep nearer, foam shining silver as it rolled up the sand. The fire popped, sending sparks into the sky, but she felt no chill, no need for anything else. For a long time, they stayed like that, wrapped in silence, wrapped in each other. The beach was no longer just a stretch of sand and sea. It was theirs, a secret world carved out of night. But as the moon climbed higher, reality tugged at her. She pulled back slightly, looking at him. I should go soon. His gaze held hers, steady and searching. I won't stop you. Her lips curved, touched with both longing and uncertainty. But you want me to stay? He didn't deny it. He only nodded once, his hand still holding hers. Yes. I do. The honesty in his words sent another shiver through her. She wanted to stay, more than anything. Yet something inside her still held her back, whispering caution. I'll come back, she said at last, her voice firm, though her heart ached at the distance she was creating. His fingers brushed hers one last time as she stood. Then I'll be here. As she walked away, the firelight faded behind her, but his kiss lingered on her lips, sweet and burning all at once. The ocean's song filled her ears, but it was his voice, his touch, his presence that echoed inside her chest. And she knew this was only the beginning. The tide was pulling them closer, night after night, and she was powerless to resist. The next evening, she didn't pretend to hesitate. She didn't waste time making excuses or trying to resist what had already become inevitable. Her heart knew where she belonged when the night arrived, by the fire, by the sea, and by him. She found herself walking faster than usual, almost eager, her feet sinking into the cool sand. The ocean glowed beneath the rising moon, and the air carried that familiar, briny scent. In the distance, she saw the fire's glow and his tall figure leaning against the driftwood. When he spotted her, his smile broke across his face like a tide. I was beginning to wonder, he said as she approached. You knew I'd come, she answered, her voice quiet but sure. I hoped, he admitted. This time, she sat down close enough that their knees brushed. He draped the jacket over her shoulders again, but tonight it wasn't just warmth, it was connection. The firelight flickered across his face, sharpening the lines of his jaw, softening the depth in his eyes. They didn't rush into words. Instead, their silence hummed with the memory of last night's kiss. She could feel it in the air between them, thicker, heavier, like the charge before a storm. When his hand found hers again, she didn't resist. Their fingers laced naturally, as though they had always fit that way. He studied her quietly, the flames reflected in his gaze. You're even more beautiful in firelight, he said softly. Her cheeks warmed, though she didn't look away. And you're too good with words. He chuckled, low and deep, the sound curling through her. I'm better with actions. The meaning in his tone made her pulse leap. Slowly, carefully, he leaned closer. She met him halfway, their lips touching in a kiss that was both familiar and brand new. This kiss was different, stronger, lingering. His hand slid to the curve of her back, pulling her closer, and she melted into him, her arms curling around his neck. The fire crackled beside them, but its warmth was nothing compared to the heat that spread through her chest, her veins, her very skin. The ocean roared, the tide rolling higher, but she heard only the sound of her own heartbeat thundering. His lips moved against hers, slow and steady, then deeper, hungrier, until the world blurred around them. When they finally pulled apart, her breath came quick, her skin tingling. She rested her forehead against his, her eyes closed. You make it impossible to leave, she whispered. Then don't, he murmured, his thumb brushing her cheek. Stay as long as you want. She smiled faintly, her heart racing at the honesty in his words. The fire painted their shadows across the sand, long and intertwined. She leaned back against him, her head resting on his shoulder as his arm wrapped around her waist. Together they watched the waves creep ever closer, as though the sea itself wanted to join their embrace. Time became slippery. The moon climbed higher, silver spilling across the water. She felt the rise and fall of his chest beneath her cheek, steady and grounding. His presence was a comfort, but also a spark both soothing and dangerous. Her fingers traced idle patterns along his arm, feeling the strength there, the tension beneath his skin. He responded with a quiet inhale, his lips brushing her hair as though he couldn't help it. The touch sent another rush through her, and she tilted her face up to him again. Their lips met once more, this time unhurried but intense, a kiss that seemed to speak of promises and possibilities neither dared to voice aloud. His hand pressed gently against the small of her back, drawing her closer until there was no space left between them. She lost herself in the moment, in the taste of him, the heat of his body, the endless rhythm of the ocean around them. For a heartbeat, she felt as though the night itself had swallowed them whole, leaving nothing but fire, sea, and the undeniable pull between two souls. When they finally broke apart again, the silence was different. He searched her eyes, his voice low and steady. "You'll be here tomorrow?" She nodded, breathless, her lips still tingling. "Always." As she walked home later, the sound of the waves followed her. The memory of his touch lingered on her skin like fire that refused to fade. And she knew each night was carrying them closer to something neither of them could resist. The tide was rising. And soon, it would sweep them both away. The ocean was restless that night, waves crashing harder against the shore as though echoing the storm of anticipation inside her. She didn't even try to make excuses this time. She hurried down the familiar path, her shawl barely clinging to her shoulders as the salty wind tugged at it. When the firelight appeared in the distance, her heart skipped. He was there, waiting as always, standing this time instead of sitting. The flames painted him in bronze and shadow, and when his eyes found hers, she felt the ground tilt beneath her feet. "You're here," he said, his voice low, steady but laced with something deeper, something that had been building between them for nights. "Of course," she whispered, her breath uneven. She didn't sit right away. Instead, she stopped in front of him, the firelight flickering between them. For a long heartbeat, they only stared, the silence thick with everything unspoken. Then, as though drawn by a force greater than either of them, she stepped forward. Their lips met before words could. This kiss was nothing like the first, or even the second. It was urgent, hungry, as if they had been waiting lifetimes for this moment. His arms wrapped around her, strong and sure, pulling her against him. Her hands slid up to his shoulders, her fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. The warmth of him, the strength, the closeness, it consumed her. The fire roared beside them, but it was their own heat that set the night ablaze. His lips moved against hers, slow at first, then deeper, fiercer, until she was breathless. When he pulled back slightly, their foreheads touched, both of them unsteady. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his voice rough. She shook her head quickly, her eyes shining in the firelight. "Don't you dare." That was all he needed. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation, no distance. His hands traced her back, holding her as though he feared she might vanish. She pressed closer, her body fitting perfectly against his, as though the ocean itself had shaped them for this very moment. The waves crashed louder, reaching almost to their feet, but neither noticed. They sank down together onto the sand, the firelight casting wild shadows across their entwined forms. The sand was cool beneath her, but his warmth surrounded her, melting away every thought, every fear. His touch was careful yet filled with longing, his lips trailing across her cheek, her jaw, the soft curve of her neck. She gasped softly, her fingers tangling in his hair, urging him closer. Each brush of his mouth sent shivers racing through her, each caress a promise whispered without words. The world narrowed to just this: his breath against her skin, the taste of salt and smoke, the steady rhythm of their bodies moving closer, closer still. The sea roared, the fire crackled, and she felt herself surrendering completely, giving herself to the tide that had pulled them together from the start. Time slipped away, lost in the rush of passion. There was no past, no future, only now. Only him. When the intensity finally eased, they lay together on the sand, breathless, tangled in each other's arms. The fire had burned lower, glowing embers painting the night with soft red light. The waves lapped gently now, calmer, as if the ocean itself had been satisfied by their surrender. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. His arm held her close, strong and protective. For the first time in a long while, she felt not just passion but safety, belonging, as if she had finally found the place where she was meant to be. Neither spoke for a while. The silence was enough: the warmth of their bodies, the rhythm of the sea, the glow of fading fire. At last, he kissed the top of her head, his voice a whisper against her hair. "You're not just a moment. You know that, don't you?" She closed her eyes, a smile softening her lips. "I know." The night wrapped around them, endless and eternal. And as the tide whispered against the shore, she realized the beach would never be the same. It was no longer just a place. It was the beginning of them. Dawn crept slowly over the horizon, painting the ocean in pale golds and soft pinks. The waves shimmered in the morning light, calm and gentle, carrying the remnants of last night's tide. She woke with the taste of salt and warmth still clinging to her, the memory of his arms around her like the most natural place in the world. He was awake too, watching her quietly, his chest rising and falling steadily. The fire had burned low, leaving glowing embers scattered across the sand, and the world beyond the beach seemed to hold its breath. "Morning," she whispered, her voice soft and rough with sleep. He smiled, the kind of smile that made her chest ache in the best way. "Morning. You slept well?" She nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Better than I have in a long time." He reached out, fingers lightly tracing her cheek. "I think the ocean agrees," he said, nodding toward the gentle waves. "It's almost peaceful now, after last night." She laughed softly, the sound mingling with the sea breeze. "Last night felt like a storm." "Or a tide," he corrected, his eyes softening. "It pulled us together, and now we're here." She leaned against him again, letting his arms wrap around her. The warmth was comforting, but also grounding. The passion of the night before had left them breathless, yes, but it had also left something else, something deeper. Something that whispered of trust, of connection, of unspoken promises. For a long while, they didn't speak. They just watched the waves, their hands intertwined, the firelight fading into memory. Each moment felt heavy with meaning, the kind of silence that isn't empty, but full of emotion, of possibility, of shared history written in just a single night. Finally, she tilted her head to look at him, her voice barely above the whisper of the sea. "Do you ever wonder, what happens after tonight?" He studied her carefully, a faint crease on his forehead. All the time, he admitted. But I also know I don't want this to end. Not this, not us. Her fingers tightened around his. I don't either. But I'm scared. He shifted, brushing his thumb over her knuckles. I know. I'm scared too. But fear doesn't mean we shouldn't feel this. Fear doesn't mean we shouldn't try. She nodded, leaning closer. I think I've been waiting for this. For you. For something like this. And now you have it, he whispered, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. And I won't let it go. The waves lapped gently at the shore, carrying a rhythm that mirrored their quiet hearts. She rested her head against his chest, listening to the rise and fall of his breathing. It was steady. It was safe. It was home. Time seemed to stretch, the sun climbing higher, casting gold across the sand. They remained there, holding each other, letting the quiet of morning and the memory of night mingle. There was no need for words, no need to move too quickly. The world could wait. Here, on this beach, they had everything they needed each other. At one point, he brushed a strand of wet sand from her arm, his fingers lingering. You make me feel alive, he murmured, almost as if confessing a secret. She smiled, warmth spreading through her chest. And you make me feel safe. It wasn't just the fire or the ocean or the thrill of last night that made the moment perfect. It was the quiet intimacy, the shared vulnerability, the knowledge that they had crossed a threshold together and found each other on the other side. Eventually, she sighed, stretching slightly, the sand cool beneath her. We should get up soon, she said reluctantly. But I don't want to leave. He pressed a finger to her lips, silencing her gently. Then don't think about leaving. Not yet. Let the tide stay with us a little longer. She laughed softly, closing her eyes again. I think I could stay forever like this. Then let's, he whispered, and for a while, there was nothing but the two of them, the waves, and the memory of firelight wrapped around their hearts. The world beyond the beach could wait. Here, they had discovered something rare, something neither time nor tide could take away. The sun had fully risen, spilling warmth across the sand and painting the ocean in sparkling shades of gold. Yet, despite the brightness of day, she found herself reluctant to leave the beach. The night, the fire, the ocean, all of it had changed her, and more than anything, she wanted to stay in the quiet cocoon of their shared world a little longer. He stood beside her, his hand brushing hers. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like a rhythm their hearts had already learned. His eyes, still shadowed with sleep and firelight memory, held a softness that made her chest ache. I could stay here forever, she whispered, letting her head rest against his shoulder. And I would let you, he replied, his voice steady and tender. If we could, we would. But the tide, and the world, will pull us eventually. Still, we have this. Her lips curved into a small smile. Then let's make the most of it. They walked toward the water, bare feet sinking into the cool sand, the waves brushing at their ankles. The rhythm of the ocean mirrored the rhythm of their hearts, steady and rising together. He brushed his thumb along the back of her hand, sending shivers up her arm. The air was warm, yet the touch of his fingers was enough to ignite a fire she could feel in every nerve. She turned to him suddenly, a mischievous glint in her eyes. Do you know what last night did to me? He arched a brow, a teasing smile tugging at his lips. I have some ideas, he said, but there was no pretense in his tone. Only curiosity, desire, and the calm assurance of someone who had crossed that same threshold and wanted more. Before she could respond, he drew her close, pressing his lips to hers with a tenderness that still held the echoes of last night's passion. The kiss deepened quickly, urgent but careful, as though neither wanted to let the other slip away. Her hands found his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and she melted against him, losing herself in the rhythm of their connection. The waves lapped closer, cold spray touching their skin, but they barely noticed. Time seemed to fold around them, leaving only the warmth of bodies pressed together, the taste of salt and lips, and the fire that had never truly left them. When they finally parted, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "You're extraordinary," he murmured. "Every night with you feels like the first, but better." Her laughter was soft, almost a whisper. "And every moment with you feels infinite." He smiled, capturing her hand again. "Then let's make a promise." She tilted her head, curious. "What kind of promise?" "That no matter where life takes us, no matter the tide or the years, we'll return to this our night, our beach, our fire, our us." Her heart swelled. The weight of the ocean, the heat of the sun, and the lingering embers of night all seemed to press around them. "I promise," she whispered, her voice certain. He leaned in again, and this time the kiss was gentle, full of everything words could never capture. It lingered long enough for the world to fade completely, leaving only the soft whisper of the waves, the warm glow of the sun, and the certainty that they had found something permanent, rare, and unshakable. When they finally pulled back, he brushed a strand of hair from her face. "No matter what comes next, we have this memory. And the promise of more." She nodded, resting her head against his chest one last time before they rose together, hands still intertwined. The fire had burned out hours ago, but its warmth lingered, a mirror of the fire that burned between them. As they walked back along the beach, leaving footprints that the tide would soon claim, she realized something simple yet profound: some nights change everything. Some nights are more than moments, they are beginnings. And this night, this beach, this man, he was hers, just as she was his. The tides would come and go, but what they had discovered together would endure. The ocean whispered around them, steady and eternal. And with the sun climbing higher, lighting the path ahead, they stepped forward into a future built on fire, moonlight, and endless nights on the beach.